His balls may be hot, but I have gone cold on Derrick Lewis. I started out as a pretty big fan. Solid sound bites, relatively entertaining fights when he can get his game going, and most importantly, a willingness to be different. In a world where Tom Aspinall, our heavyweight champion, our gold standard, is one of the most well-rounded heavyweights we've ever seen, and fighters up and down the roster are concerned with being well-rounded or at least filling in some of the holes in their game. Derrick Lewis doesn't make big changes. The secret to his success over the last couple of fights here has been the mind-boggling training regimen that is running a couple of miles every other day. I wish I was kidding. But aside from his extreme training and his fight style, over the last 5 years, I've soured on him. It has been a slow crawl to get here, but I have hit rock bottom in my Derrick Lewis fandom. And make no mistake, this is an unpopular take. Derrick is such a beloved fighter, and there's so many compilations and lists where he's labeled as the funniest man in MMA. But if you allow me to take you through Derrick Lewis's fights, and his antics, and his personal life, I can help you reach a very different conclusion from the one you already have. So please join me as we dissect Derrick Lewis. In preparation for this video, I watched every single Derrick Lewis fight, and I am impressed. Impressed by how lucky this guy is. Anytime he's fought anyone with any level of skill, that's 3 any's in one sentence, he would struggle. Jack May couldn't stop one of the most telegraphed double legs that I have ever seen, and then kept giving up top position and failed a takedown by sitting on his ass. Just insane. Guto Innocente, he did similar stuff. Put himself on his back, tried to go for a sweep off bottom or something, and then got tangled up and TKO'd. Matt Mitrione was competent, and he was able to KO him with a forearm. Ruan Potts, and we'll talk about this in a bit here, got intentionally fouled pretty bad early on and never quite fully recovered. He wasn't very good, but he was never given a fighting chance. Then Derrick got hook kicked by Sean Jordan. This guy just seems like a white Chris Barnett, as tall as he is wide, with some wacky ass kicks. Victor Pesta did the exact same thing as some of the other guys, shot a wonky takedown, and ate some very inaccurate ground and pound. Damian Grabowski shot a bad takedown, got hip-tossed, and then ground and pounded, which led to another TKO win for Derrick Lewis. Gabriel Gonzaga was a good win, KO'd him up against the fence, pretty legit. The Roy Nelson fight is really weird because Lewis gets held down the first round, wins the second with some flurries, and then is losing the third clearly, and lands 5 punches in the last 30 seconds, and then wins the fight. I'm not gonna argue robbery, but really close fight where you can argue he lost. Shamil Abdurakhimov won the first 3 rounds, and then got taken down and ground and pounded to a 4th round stoppage. Are we noticing a pattern? Travis Brown tried a lateral drop and just fell on his back. Mark Hunt was on his way to winning a decision against Derrick Lewis, and then he stopped him up against the fence. Mark Hunt would finish his MMA career 1-4 in his last 5. Derrick was that one. Marcin Tybura fell over the top on a body triangle, and then ran into a right hand. The Francis Ngannou fight was one of the most disappointing in MMA history. There are no winners. Derrick Lewis is there on paper, but just a nothing fight. Volkov is 11 seconds away from 30-27ing Lewis, and then he gets hit with an overhand from hell. Biggest event of all time, let's etch ourselves into history by taking our pants off. Star power through the roof, let's capitalize on it by giving him a title shot. Oh no, you can't fix stupid. DC walks through him, and then he rebounds by losing to 2019 JDS, a man who would never win in the UFC again. Split decision against Blagoy Ivanov, who would go 1-3 in the UFC before leaving for Bellator, where he lost again. Wins a decision against Ilir Latifi, who's a 5'10 heavyweight, and at this point in his career could only beat Canadians and old men, both of whom are at a disadvantage. Oh, we have a contender, ladies and gentlemen. He beat a 43-year-old Alexei Olenek, whilst almost losing the first round and needing 4 to 5 back of the head shots. Curtis Blaydes just had to dip into that punch, didn't he? Oh, he would have won a boring-ass 50-45 decision, but he just had to dip into it, didn't he? God damn it, Derrick, you made Cyril Gane look good. Chris Daukaus lost to Derrick Lewis and would never win again. Tai Tuivasa out Derrick Lewis, and then he never won a fight again. Sergey Pavlovich is not a bad loss. That's actually pretty good. It's aged relatively well. Sergey Spivak took him down and manhandled him. Turns out If Derrick Lewis faces a somewhat competent grappler, he struggles. Marcos Rogerio de Lima got flying kneed in about 30 seconds. Given his record and how long he's been in the UFC, I'm surprised he wasn't already a Derrick Lewis victim. At least he didn't get finished by Jailton Almeida, I guess. Rodrigo Nascimento held him down for 2 rounds and got his back and held him up against the cage, was just working him in the grappling. And then Derrick gets the comeback win. Look at the 20 unanswered shots that Derrick's allowed to land here while Nascimento's in on a single. So you can't even say that Jason Herzog respects heavyweight power so much to where he calls a fight a little early or whatever, because that's been a common excuse for the stoppage in the Talison Teixeira fight. Oh, Derrick hits really hard and he's just stopping him from taking unnecessary damage. Yeah, tell that to Rodrigo's brain rattling around for 20 punches worth of damage. And then Talison Teixeira only has 1 win in the UFC. He rocked Derrick and then ran in like a moron. So what have we learned from this experience? The main takeaway is that Derrick's power is there, but it's also heavily overrated. The real Derrick Lewis magic is knocking people down with glancing blows and then using all 250 pounds to pin them down and land more inaccurate punches from there. All while facing subpar competition, of course. The total win-loss record of Derrick's UFC wins in the UFC is 129 wins to 102 losses. Fighting that many unskilled guys, acting like you're an elite fighter, and then saying that you beat the, quote, king of the cab drivers is borderline criminal behavior. Now, this story has been pretty effectively buried, either on purpose or just because nobody cared. It doesn't really matter to me which, but I just thought that I'd share it because it's a lesser-known piece of Derrick Lewis lore. When Derrick Lewis was a youngin', he got into a love triangle type scenario with a 36-year-old woman and her recently divorced husband. Derrick and his friends were exiting a house party, and this guy was looking for him in a truck. So Lewis and his friends made sure that they saw him, they waved him down, called out to him, whatever, and then they lured him into an alley. Derrick Lewis walked up to the truck and the guy allegedly reached for a shotgun on the passenger seat, and then Derrick beat the snot out of him. I'm not saying he was in the wrong, or the right, or whatever, but I don't like the fact that the story has morphed into something different over time. Now the prevailing narrative is that Derrick Lewis went to jail for aggravated assault, he was drinking on a night out on the town, minding his own business, and then randomly ran into a member of the Ku Klux Klan who insulted him, and despite the fact that the man was holding a shotgun, Lewis proceeded to beat him up. This is the series of events that is used in YouTube Shorts with millions of views and Reddit posts, and if people know about the crimes, generally this is the story that they know. Could that guy be a part of the KKK? For sure. Is he in the right for chasing down his ex-wife's lover with a shotgun? Hell no. But my big issue is we don't have court documents, police reports, or any sort of paperwork. You guys know I try to do my due diligence, and I know how to access these kinds of records, I know where to look, and this stuff is buried really deep. All we have available to the public is Derrick Lewis's first-hand account. He didn't even go to jail for assault. He was put on probation and didn't pay the fines or show up to the meetings, so he went for that. I dislike the fact that the story has changed so much, and that's partially the internet's fault, but Derrick over time has also changed the retelling of the situation over the last decade or so. He said that he approached the guy with a shotgun in his hand, showing no fear, and made it sound like they were just out in the open, but having a shotgun in a car is a little bit different, and then we don't even know if there was a shotgun. We don't even know if he called him slurs. This is all, again, from Derrick's point of view. I'm not saying we can't trust him. I'm just saying we don't have any sort of concrete evidence for anyone's claims. Supposedly, after Derrick beat him up, the guy lost vision in one of his eyes as well. That's from Derrick's point of view, so that's possible. Why would he kind of incriminate himself in that regard? There's a lot of openings and a lot of holes in his story, or if we even want to take the other guy's story. Why were you chasing down 18, 19-year-old? Oh, because he was sleeping with your wife, dude. It's your ex-wife now. She's allowed to do whatever she wants, technically. So it's a really weird gray area. But it didn't take place out in the open. It's not like Derrick Lewis was having like a Terminator moment where he kind of just walked towards someone with a shotgun aimed at him or something like that. No, It took place through a car window or an open car door, and the problematic views that this guy had or has kind of came out of nowhere. We have no one to corroborate that, so that's that, man. There's not much else as far as crimes for Derrick Lewis. He did go 136 in a 50-mile-per-hour zone while weaving in and out of traffic in a Lamborghini. That's a long sentence. And then when asked about it, he brushed it off and joked about it, saying, "Oh, different guy, mistaken identity. He had hair and didn't weigh as much." Yeah, buddy, no. He got off with a $200 ticket, but it's more of a character arrest, if that makes any sense. It shows Derrick's nature as a man who kind of just doesn't care. And this was like 2 years ago, something like that. On the other hand, if we want to play devil's advocate, there was a hurricane in 2017 in Houston, and he pulled people out of the water with his truck. That's pretty cool. So as far as motor vehicles go, he's broken even. That's the extent of Derrick's criminal actions. Regarding the assault from 2004, he was 18 or 19 at the time, kind of fresh out of high school, so I don't really hold it against him, but the story changing is a little bit strange, and especially the story changing so it becomes a beating up, racist, revenge, fantasy type story is a little bit weird. Okay, if it's true, then sure, but there are a lot of missing details, and we don't have the other guy's side of the story, but I could for sure be wrong. At a certain point, the antics and the funny moments become a little bit tiresome and kind of just a dick move sometimes. Now, every time he wins a fight, he adds an extra piece to his post-fight celebration. And I'm not the fun police, but doing the fucking arrow thing when the guy's still standing across from you and you were given the MMA equivalent of a dusty finish is a bit of a bad look. Doing the dog peeing action, I expect that out of the dirty boxing guys, not ranked UFC fighters. Throwing the cup in shorts and getting on a phone call, like, after you've seen it so many times, it gets a little bit tiresome. Like, dude, you're 40, you have children, maybe it's time to tone it down a little bit. I was going to cover this in a different video, but I got a little bit busy. At the St. Louis fight night, I ran all the numbers. Derrick should owe the city of St. Louis approximately $2.6 million for mooning the crowd. Each person affected is its own charge, so maybe it's a couple thousand charges. He's now done it again in Tennessee. These fines are a little bit lower, but again, we're looking at potentially millions of dollars. Now, this would take all the participants involved to press legal charges, but a big-ass class action lawsuit against the UFC for widespread indecent exposure would be pretty funny. Generally speaking, aside from it technically being a crime, it's just childish. Derrick's admitted to cheating in the past, extending his fingers out, purposefully low-blowing Ruan Potts to calm his nerves, whatever that means. Yeah, I guess putting yourself at an advantage would calm your nerves. The UFC already doesn't call enough fouls. But when John Jones says this kind of thing, everybody rightfully gets on his ass. Oh yeah, I know I'm a cheater. It is what it is. If it was really cheating, they'd catch me and they'd fine me and this and that, but they don't. Like, it's the same deal here. Maybe it's a little bit of a double standard when it's someone they like. I think that's probably the deal. But again, this is an interview. He said it out loud. This isn't a veiled secret. This is out in the open. Everybody remembers that's Herb Dean's fault. But nobody remembers moments later when he told a semi-conscious Curtis Blades to, quote, blame your coach. Little bit of a dick move. Kicking a man while he's down rubs me the wrong way. Just a little bit. I understand that Derrick and Curtis did have a little bit of beef prior to the fight. Curtis said that Derrick had been protected throughout his UFC career, and I would tend to agree with that because when he finished Tallis and Teixeira, everyone's jaw was on the floor, trying to figure out why the stoppage happened the way it did. But without hesitation, the commentary booth goes into their almost scripted sounding reaction. And that's gonna do it. He stopped him. Wow, says Laura Sanko. The knockout record is still very safe. It may be a larger issue with commentary, but a lot of the time it'll happen in the UFC's favor, where the commentary disregards any controversy or fouls or anything of that nature just because a finish happened, so we have to react to that. The biggest example I can think of is Ngannou versus Fahea in PFL. A different organization, but no one bothered to mention the back of the headshots because their golden boy won. It also happened in Zhang Mingyang versus Anthony Smith. 2 punches to the back of the head, 7 elbows to the back of the head, 2 elbows to the back of the spine, and no one in the MMA fandom really cared because Anthony Smith is arrogant or whatever and we don't like him. And the commentary team doesn't want to devalue the win for Zhang Mingyang, even though it's a little bit worthy of being devalued. Oh, look at that! It's Herzog again! Not calling fouls and instead just stopping the fight. The whole knockout leader thing is interesting because TKOs are a big part of it. And as we went through earlier, that's the majority of Derrick's wins. A knockdown off of a glancing blow and 50-50 ground and pound. 7 of his UFC wins are actual clean knockouts where the opponent goes out. 9 are TKOs where they just cover up. Ilia Topuria, for example, has fully separated 6 people from consciousness in the UFC in half the time, a third of the time. I would almost argue that he's more of a knockout artist than Derrick Lewis. But most knockouts sells better than most KO TKOs, so they run with it. The fact that we're throwing around Aspinall versus Derrick Lewis is insane and a testament to the UFC's ability to market people. Tom Aspinall versus Derrick Lewis would be horrific matchmaking. Cool. He's only ever a couple of fights from the title, but Cyril Gane already shouldn't be getting the shot. He's coming off a loss. It should be Aspinall Volkov too. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. So potentially passing up both of those men, Volkov and Gane, would be a grave error. Derrick has wins over 4 guys in the rankings, but he also has losses to 5 guys in the rankings, 4 of which are ahead of him. The heavyweights that Derrick has recently beat were untested or on losing streaks. They've been rebuilding him and giving him very winnable matchups for the last little bit here. Whereas a guy like Rodrigo Nascimento wasn't afforded those same opportunities. I get it, he's not as big of a star, but he went 4-3 in the UFC and was cut after losing to Lewis and Romanov. He was still a top 20 heavyweight. But now Derrick has enough star power to carry him through thick and thin, and the UFC will just continue to give him old guys or journeymen for the sake of spectacle and that beloved knockout record. Derrick doesn't have that record because he's a great fighter. He has it because he's just mid enough to not fight the upper echelon guys and bad enough to get layups. If Ngannou, Aspinall, or maybe even Stipe faced the exact same fighters, they would also have the knockout record. You're telling me Stipe can't TKO Alexei Olenek? I hope this video illustrates why I dislike Derrick Lewis. Again, it's not very personal, it's just I think he's pushed a little bit too much, and the fact that people love him and he's unanimously beloved at this point in time is a little bit silly to me, or it's a little bit foreign to me is I think the right word. I just don't quite understand it in the same way other people do, and I get it. I used to be a fan as well. It's kind of gone stale, and we need personalities in the sport, but personalities over time have to evolve, and Derrick hasn't evolved. He's kept upping his bodaciousness. Is that maybe the word we want to use here? But he hasn't changed. He hasn't grown really in a meaningful way, again, other than cardio every other day. Let me know what you think about Derrick Lewis in the comment section below. If you like breakdowns like this, here's a playlist of other MMA fighters I dislike. You'll probably enjoy these videos too. Like, comment, and subscribe for more MMA content. Shout out to Shauna, Proletarian Gothic, and Lambslayer for being vampiric enjoyers. Thank you all so much for watching. Derrick Lewis would never knock me out because I don't drive cabs. And have a good time.